Hi everyone, I'm Fed Rios. I'm an industrial design consultant based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been invited to participate in this Industrial Design 7-Question Challenge. So in this video, I'm going to give you my personal answers to these questions, and in the description below, you'll be able to find links to many other designers also participating. All right, let's get into it. Also, just a quick warning. I tend to be a much better verbal communicator when I'm actually drawing, so I'm going to be sketching out a concept while I give you my answers. Okay, here we go. Question 1. Industrial design is a fairly uncommon field. How did you discover it? So I grew up in a pretty idyllic setting in an agricultural region of Colombia in South America. It was to a large family of citrus farmers. So we grew everything from oranges, tangerines, limes, and lemons, just to name a few. But on top of that, my dad was also an industrial designer, and he taught design classes at a local university. I remember he always had a very entrepreneurial spirit, and he had a prototyping and fabrication shop in our farm where he would build these large giant machines for citrus sortings based on these big conveyor belts and aluminum extrusions. So this was usually a job done by hand beforehand, and he really did bring in automation and innovation to make everyone in the industry's lives a little bit easier. And some of my earliest memories as a kid were me, maybe 4 or 5 years old, hanging out with my dad in his shop and building these little things out of nuts and bolts and scrap pieces of aluminum. Basically any little tools or objects that my Lego figures could interact with. I also remember he would give me sketchbooks, so I've always been sketching since I was very, very young, and I've always had one with me on hand. And since he was also a teacher, I remember he would come home and try out some of his lessons on me. So one big vivid memory I have is he would bring back those large 3M presentation easel sticky pad things and have me practice drawing straight lines both horizontally and also vertically until I had filled up that whole pad. And once I did, we'd start all over again and do it again. So long story short, I was very lucky to have a dad that introduced me to the industrial design profession from a very early age, and someone who would also mentor me on those crucial hard skills like sketching and prototyping. Question 2. How do you explain your job to those who don't know about ID? So one very positive thing I would say about this is that since I started my career maybe 10 or so years ago, there's a lot more people now that are aware of our profession and the industrial design term than back then. For example, I'll start a conversation with someone and they'll ask me, "Hey, what do you do?" So I would start by saying that I design the look and feel as well as the interactions of a physical product. And then they'll go, "Oh, okay, so you're an industrial designer." So hearing that has been a pretty nice little detail pointing to the proliferation of our profession and increased awareness of our field and what we do. Question 3. What inspirations have developed your ID style? Okay, so these are just a few, but from early on, I spent a lot of time outside in Colombia, and I was very inspired by nature and specifically birds. Colombia has some of the biggest biodiversity when it comes to animals, so our bird species are very abundant, very colorful, and just super unique when it comes to their appearance and their movements. I've actually included a link below so you can see some of them yourself. Then a little bit later on in high school, I was pretty lucky to attend a magnet arts program where we had the chance to do painting, life drawing, and even some sculpture. And there I learned about the work of Alexander Calder, specifically his mobiles and kinetic sculptures, which in my opinion were designed to look much better in motion rather than just still objects. And then after that, early on in university and some of our foundations courses, I was introduced to the work of Charlie Parker. He's an illustrator, and his work really perfectly marries that sense of dynamism and movement with just beautiful compositions and perfect color harmony. And his subject matter is usually birds or nature. So it all kind of came full circle there. So looking back at my body of work, I've definitely noticed some patterns. A lot of these objects I've designed are meant to move. They look better in motion than static. They also look more alive when they are in action or are super dirty. There's definitely a lot of pivots, a lot of moving parts. There's also a ton of rotational symmetry involved in my design when it comes to wheels and spokes and rotating objects. And I've also been known to inject quite a bit of personality into my work, some of which certainly came from the bird world. I'll show you some examples here. Question 4. Which company would you love to design a product for? So most of my career, I've been focused in the cycling industry, which is still my biggest passion. And I'm, to this day, very lucky to be collaborating with some pretty exciting companies on some really innovative and disruptive projects in the outdoor industry and mobility worlds. So for this question, I would really say any company, any inventor or entrepreneur in the mobility space where they have crazy ideas for either new bike components, new outdoor instruments, even e-bikes, or any out there autonomous vehicles or mobility projects, ride sharing, any of those, I think I'd really like to get into next. Or really anyone with a wild or disruptive idea with the aim to keep people moving and going, and enough vision and drive to execute it with a focus on the user experience, but also while viewing it through a design lens. Question 5. What is your go-to industrial design program and why? Okay, that one's actually pretty easy for me. At the moment, it's definitely Gravity Sketch, because I can take my VR headset, put it on, and do things like this. So while I'm in here in Gravity Sketch, I can do things like import engineering data and hard points in a one-to-one scale like this and really evaluate everything. I can then take a sketch and overlay it over that, my gestural sketch that I've done before. I can translate that into a gestural 2D sketch in the right proportions. Then I can take those lines and extrapolate them into 3D curves. So and then from those 3D curves, I can create and generate volumes super quickly and easily in full 3D at the right scale to really evaluate what's going on, which is awesome for ergonomics as well. So if I'm looking at this in a one-to-one scale, I can really see what's happening and, actually pretend to be on the bike and riding it. Not only are these super quick and easy to generate, I can also review these sketch models with my clients, iterate super quickly, and then come up with the best design solutions. Most often, this is done completely remotely. Question 6. What do you dislike most about industrial design? Okay, this one might be a bit of a controversial take, but I haven't liked lately the notion that some techniques or skills have to be done or executed in a certain way, just because that's the way they've always been done. For example, sometimes that means drawing an analog sketch, taking a picture, and then coloring in digitally. I know that's been a big topic of discussion lately. In my opinion, we're supposed to always be innovating, and part of that is constantly innovating your workflow, your presentation techniques, and your collaboration methods. So in my opinion, as long as you're constantly innovating and are able to capture your design intent to exactly how you want it to be and present it in the most compelling way to your intended audience, then in my opinion, you're doing your job right. And finally, the last question, number 7. What makes an industrial design good? To me, my measure of success for designs and products that have made it into the real world is that if it has given the user some level of excitement or some kind of improvement to an activity that they already enjoy a lot, then that, in my view, has been a successful design. Alternatively, in my consulting role lately, a lot of the work I do is pretty speculative and not really meant for store shelves. 90% of it doesn't make it past the client and the stakeholders. So if I'm able to use empathy correctly and distill my client's idea into the best version of it, and then visualize it in the most compelling way possible for its intended audience, then that execution, in my view, is a great industrial design as well. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening to my personal answers to these questions. Don't forget to check out the links below for answers from all these other designers. If you want to get in touch with me to look at my portfolio of work or even my design Instagram, I've posted those links below as well. Check them out. Thanks again. Goodbye.